I know y'all are used to me talking theology and talking to other Christians and other believers, but today I have my brother from the Jewish side of life. My friend, my brother, none other than Rabbi Noah Arnow.
There are lots of people in America and in the world who have fantastic relationships across faith and culture. There are people married to each other who, bridge these gaps in the most intimate.
Sure.
What we're doing here, is in certain ways unusual because we are clergy. The folks I work with are for the most part Jewish. The folks you work with are for the most part Christian.
Professing Christians.
Professing Christians of your particular flavor of Christianity.
It's true. It's true.
And same thing with me. So for us to actually be in relationship and deep relationship with people who are like the other, like you for me and me for you, that's actually what's unusual. Segregation is a thing still in America, if not, by law, often just by practice and choice and culture. There are not as many Jewish communities that have close relationships with Black communities. There are not many Jewish communities that have close relationships with evangelical communities. We bridged that geographic segregation gap by living in the same building.
Yeah, for 2.5 years.
For 2.5 years.
What up, though, family? Welcome to Dig In with Dr. Los. And today we have a very special episode. Normally, I'm talking to believers and to Christians who come from the same faith tradition as my own. But not only do I have relationships and friends with people who are within the church, I have friends and relationships with people who are from different faith traditions. And these are deep, abiding friendships that mean the world to me. And today I have my friend, my brother, none other than Rabbi Noah Arnow. He is the rabbi at Arena Synagogue here in St. Louis, and we have been friends now for a number of years. We've traveled together, we've eaten together, we've had a lot of conversations about the Bible, scripture. We've led Bible studies together between a church and a synagogue. Can you imagine that? Reading scripture together. And so we've had years of friendship. So I want to welcome my friend, my brother, Rabbi Noah Arnow. What's up, Rabbi Noah?
Great to be here with you, Carlos. Can I call you Carlos?
You can.
On this?
Yeah.
Good. That's the only thing I know to call you.
Well, man, I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm glad that you agreed to hang out with me today. I mean, we hang out regularly.
We hang out, but not on tape.
Yeah. So it's not normal for us to like record when we hanging out. Most time when we're hanging out, we're just like, eating, talking, sitting in one another's office, and it's good, man. So how are things going? How are you feeling today?
Okay. It's a heavy time.
Yeah.
Today's what? Friday, August 8th that we're recording this. And it's a heavy time in the time of the world. And also, here in St. Louis, and I work in Clayton. I live in New City. But it's a heavy time here too.
It is. Absolutely. Well, brother, I'm glad that you are here with me. I'm glad we can spend time. And I want us to just kind of start organically talking a bit about how our friendship began. And when we first started to, build a friendship and how that happened. It started, for those who don't know, Refresh Community Church. This was once the home of Arena Synagogue. And we did a building swap. And, then we were, how many years did we share space?
2.5 years or so,
2.5
probably.
years.
We shared this building while we were living in it, and you guys had done some renovations in it that we lived through. And you were living in your old building that we then owned. And then you guys moved in here, and we did a bunch of renovations and work in your old building that we then owned, and we were your tenants for a while. And then we moved finally out of here. Yeah. Probably we moved out in about 2021 completely, just about.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to know, how was that, I've jokingly said like cohabitating a church and a synagogue, sharing space. How was that experience? I mean, I have my perspective, but I'm interested in yours. I mean, I had fun, but I don't.
It was a long time ago. A lot's happened since then. Oh my gosh. The best part of it was our relationship, and that developing. But it's also fascinating to see. I mean, imagine seeing someone else live in your house.
Yeah.
A little disconcerting. Oh, they put things differently. They move things around. But also, I kind of like what they did with that. And understanding the ways that somebody's going to do something differently and actually really being there to see it. That was actually, pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Fun fact, guys, Rabbi Noah's old office is now my office. I scouted it out. I would go up and I would visit with him, and I was like, hey, this spot got nice windows up here. And so after the transition was complete, after you guys had moved into your new space, I was like, the staff, they knew I kind of had an eye on it. And so they surprised me by moving all my stuff up and things like that. And so it's my new digs, but it was originally just full of a lot of rabbinic documents and, all your wonderful books and scholarly things.
Lots of books.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this, Rabbi Noah. What has it been like for you? Like, my experience was, being in the same space. For me, it was very fascinating. Like, I mean, it was fascinating because, obviously we share the Hebrew scriptures in common with the Jewish people. And so, I've read about, the festivals and the feasts and Passover and Yom Kippur. And, I've read these things in abstract. It was a whole nother ballgame to like see it in action, to come outside. So I'll never forget the first time, the Feast of Booth, was it Sukkot? Sukkot. Oh yeah, my Hebrew isn't what it used to be. I need to, come back to Shabbat services. But I remember coming out and I'm like, okay, so we're just in booths. This is still happening like many thousands of years later. Like, and so for me, it was like, I felt like it was immersion in the Hebrew world on a level because I got a chance to see. I also didn't realize something that was interesting to me was kind of how close many of the holidays were. I don't know, in my mind, they were further apart. I'm like, this is like a smooth, like 6-week stretch of like, a lot of celebration is what it feels like.
I wish it was 6 weeks. It's more like 3.5.
3.5? It wasn't 6?
It would be easier if it were 6.
Okay.
Mostly.
I also, I'll never forget, the first Passover Seder that you invited me to. And I just remember sitting there and we were drinking wine and I just, you read in the Bible that wine is a part of Passover, but then just realizing how wonderful the God of Israel is to say that you have to drink all this wine. I'm like, this is pretty awesome. I enjoyed myself.
What is it Proverbs or Psalms that says that wine, makes a person's heart joyful?
Makes a heart glad, yeah.
Right? Look, there's something to, I mean, everything in moderation, but but there's something to that.
Yeah. So I mean, I had a great experience and had a lot of fun. I'm interested, what has it like been, how has it been for you rather, to just have, our relationship across traditions and across, religious experiences.
There are the kinds of Christians that Jews often find themselves, in community with. And especially when I'm talking about Jews, not necessarily ultra-Orthodox Jews, the ones who you see dressed in black hats and black, everything's. But modern Orthodox Jews, liberal Jews, Reform Jews, conservative Jews, that's the denomination I am. Conservative is not a political moniker here. It's the name of like the denomination, which the idea was to conserve Jewish tradition while still living in the modern world. So the Christians that we often find ourselves hanging out with, are, United Church of Christ and, Episcopal, church. And people sometimes say that like, Episcopalians are the Christian equivalent of conservative Jews. They're like, kind of progressive in a lot of ways, but liturgically very, very traditional. And we don't spend so much time with black pastors and with folks from black churches. We don't spend so much time also with evangelicals. Okay. So to spend time with you and with originally The Journey, now Refresh, is actually like pretty unusual for a rabbi. And super interesting and fascinating. And I've learned so much about the landscape of Christianity, and everything. We paint it with like one paintbrush. There's the black church, there's evangelical, there's this, and they're all the same. And anytime you spend with anybody, you realize that there is so much diversity within every single thing that you think is all the same.
Yep, absolutely. It's interesting that you said that because that was my experience as as our friendship developed, and then as a result of our friendship, I feel like just, we took a trip to Israel and I got introduced to more rabbis and just all the and then now I have like several Jewish friends. And before I met you, it was kind of like Jews do this, it was kind of my perception. And what was funny is being from Detroit, I was actually in close proximity to quite a few Jewish people, but I didn't actually just know many, and so it was kind of like, the Jews just kind of lived. I live right near Southfield. I even ate, there was this cool pizza place called Jerusalem Pizza. I ate Jerusalem Pizza from time to time, a really good pizza. But in terms of actually, building a relationship, I only knew one Jewish guy that I knew pretty good, and he wasn't terribly observant. So he was kind of like, whatever, and when we as our relationship and our friendship grew, I realized like, wow, just like if people were to say black people do this, black people do, it's kind of like, whoa, that's a big brush. I learned very much the same thing about the Jewish community that I think what's the saying, if you got two Jews in a room, you got three opinions or something like this, or I learned like, wow, there's considerable, obviously, the Jewish people are not a large people group like compared to some other ethnicities and nationalities, but there's just such a diversity in thought and experience and even practice, and like you talked about, okay, your tradition is the conservative tradition, which is, distinct from the Orthodox tradition. And you still got the ultra Orthodox and you still got the Reformed. Yep. I learned on one of the things, is it true that when you see like temple on a synagogue, that's normally a Reformed synagogue? Is that true? I think
that's often true.
Yeah,
not a hard and fast rule, but a rule of thumb.
Yeah. So I was like, I didn't realize that I just thought a synagogue is a synagogue is a synagogue.
And they all are, but each is a little different.
Yeah. So let me ask this question, Rabbi Noah. What do you think? You talked about how rare it is, particularly for like Black pastors and Jews sit together. Often doesn't happen as much as it used to. Or it's interesting what you said about evangelical Christians because on one hand, when we get into political,
let me say every Christian is an evangelical Christian.
Every single one
is every Christian an in some sense. Am I totally wrong?
Not totally wrong, but I'm going to tell you why. The complexity around the word evangelical.
Well, it's a denominational political thing, but
it's become more politicized than theological, if that makes sense.
Theologically.
Yeah, so theologically, an evangelical Christian is a Christian who is going to be Protestant, who's going to say that a personal experience with Jesus Christ and conversion experience is what's necessary for salvation. That's going to be an evangelical Christian. And so much was interesting in theology. Much of, for example, the traditional African-American church is evangelical. Like they have evangelicals are also going to tend to have a high view of Scripture. They are going to.
What do you mean by a high view of Scripture?
Like some would say inerrancy, like the Scripture is infallible, inerrant, so forth and so on. I wouldn't say that's the only way to have a high view of Scripture. There's some diversity.
Right. And because when I say a high view of Scripture, like, I think it's a great book too.
Yeah.
High doesn't necessarily mean inerrant, when I think about it.
Absolutely.
But high means just like, fantastic.
Yeah. When I say that in a theological sense, at least from a Christian perspective, I'm sure you're familiar with JDP and those types of things. And the evangelical is going to, no, or, and then you got, but there's spectrum in there, right? Because I wouldn't go as far as say JDP myself, but I would say like, I don't think as we received Deuteronomy, I believe that Moses wrote the core of that, but there was, of course, editorial, like it actually tells you that. It tells you that, like there were scribes who were working, and
then there's like, higher criticism. There's also lower criticism, which is like, well, there could have been like, in over the period of, 3,000 years of transmission of parts of it, a few mistakes could have crept in.
Absolutely.
Of just, things being miscopied.
Absolutely. And so an evangelical is going to say, okay, the Scripture is inerrant, infallible in the original manuscript, so forth, so on. Conversion experience. So they're going to be more.
I'd love to see their original manuscript, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, right? Where are the original manuscripts?
Right. I mean, those tablets that God dictated to Moses, right?
Well, there's a whole tradition that the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia. Are you aware of this?
So I've heard this before, but I haven't actually seen the actual.
Yeah, nobody's seen it. It's like a whole thing where it's like there's a guardian who's there. It's like a whole thing.
It's like Indiana Jones.
Yeah. So but anyway, but evangelical, that's the theological perspective. It's become much more of a political term these days. Yeah. So when you say evangelical, a lot of people for example, the African American church, they're going to say, I'm not evangelical, but they don't mean I don't believe the Bible have a high view of Scripture or I don't believe direct experience with Jesus is necessary for conversion. Right. They mean mean, I'm not voting Republican. That's what they mean. Like, and that's so that term has become quite fraught. But anyway, what do you think makes it difficult for people in different faith traditions to kind of have the relationship that I mean, they can have a relationship that you and I have, but have the kind of relationship that we have across faith, across ethnicities, across various views? Yeah.
Part of it's just opportunity. Mm-hmm. Well, and first of all, let's just say there are lots of people in America and in the world who have fantastic relationships across faith and culture.
I love your aversion to ever painting with a big brush.
Like that's true.
It is true, for sure.
And not only like, there are people married to each other who, bridge these gaps in the most intimate,
sure.
Wait, so this is just to say that
that's a funny sentence. I'm sorry, keep going.
Like, what we're doing here, is in certain ways unusual because we are clergy. But there are lots of people who work together every day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the folks I work with are for the most part Jewish. Mm-hmm. The folks you work with are for the most part Christian.
Professing Christians.
Professing Christians of your particular flavor of Christianity.
It's true. It's true.
And same thing with me. So for us to actually be in relationship and deep relationship with people who are like the other, like you for me and me for you, that's actually what's unusual. Mm-hmm. I talk to lots of other rabbis, who are not exactly the same as me. Mm-hmm. You talk to lots of other pastors who are not exactly the same as you. Mm-hmm. But for, interfaith conversation, multi-faith conversation and relationship to take place, sometimes it's a little frustrating when it's happening with people who don't actually really understand and are not really intimate with their own traditions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if your congregants and my congregants were to get together and really have a conversation about their faith traditions, sometimes it can be a little frustrating because neither, you and I could sit there and listen and be like, that's not exactly right. You didn't exactly, what you said about evangelicalism is not exactly, that's not the way I would say it. That's not what the Torah says about this, So to actually really have a relationship, coming from a place of knowing something about our traditions, that's also unusual. And to me, really, really precious. And look, too, segregation is a thing still in America. If not, by law, often just by practice and choice and culture. There are not as many Jewish communities that have close relationships with Black communities. There are not many Jewish communities that have close relationships with evangelical communities. And we bridged that geographic segregation gap by living in the same building.
Yeah, for 2.5 years.
For 2.5 years. And now, we've moved a lot further away.
Yeah.
2/3 of a mile.
Yeah. We're still walkable.
Right. But the fact is also, there aren't a ton of Black churches in, a mile radius of Corina and probably of here.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And there are probably also not a ton of evangelical churches in a mile here and a mile, 2/3 of a mile south. Am I right about that?
Yeah, there's not a ton in this
right.
kind of where we are, because you guys are more is that First Ward, U City, where you are, or right on the edge?
We're in Clayton technically.
Oh, you're in Clayton now. Oh, duh.
You used to be in Clayton.
Sorry, it's the building we were in. I should know the address.
Although you were never in that building.
Yeah, I was never in that building.
Right,
I came after we were here. It was we moved here in January. They hired me in June. But technically you're in Clayton, but it's right on the edge there.
The north end. I don't remember what ward.
Yeah, that would be first. We're second, so we're in the middle. You start getting more of the African American community when you get to the third ward. So when you get over that way, you get a little more traditional African American churches and things like that. But where we are, it's not a ton. Right. And so no, that's interesting. Like what you said, because we were kind of, it was funny. I showed up. So for those who don't know the story, Refresh Community Church was born out of a merger between the Journey Hanley Road and the Gate. But before that merger happened, they had this wild idea that this was going to be this beautiful multi-ethnic church, and that it would be right in U City, right, and there ended up being a building swap right in the middle of U City. city. And so the building swap happened, and they were going to call a black pastor to pastor this church full of white people. And I've joked that I was said black pastor. I'm not sure if I was a DEI hire or not, but whatever. And so they hired me, and I was qualified though, and to pastor the church. And and at the time it was interesting because you have all white church, black pastor in a Jewish synagogue. So that was, it sounds like a joke, like, a black pastor, a synagogue, and a rabbi, and a white church walking to a bar. That's kind of what it was. So that's the story of how we ended up in proximity. And like I said, it was a blast. I love our trip to Israel. That was a lot of fun. And, I heard everybody before we left. So other fun fact, I would pop into Kiddush, which is the meal after synagogue. And, so I would meet a lot of congregation. We'd hang out. And everybody's like, man, when you go to Israel, it's going to be the best food you ever had. It's going to be the best food. And I was like, I was kind of thinking like, well, you're Jewish. You would say that. Like, and I went, and bro, that was some of the best food I've ever had. Like, I don't know if you remember this. I remember when we were in Israel. Do you remember that moment? There was some donuts at this bakery, and I think you almost got hit by a car trying to get those donuts. Like, you ran across the street. You were really excited about this donut shop.
I get excited about food.
But you stay fit. You look fit.
Trying to eat fewer donuts.
But it was a lot of fun, man. So anyway, that's a bit of how we.
Well, I'll just say, in terms of that trip, I've been to Israel, many times at this point. I spent a year living there. So the food is great, but from that trip, what I remember is less the food and more sharing a hotel room with you for, I don't know what, 10 days?
10 days? 10 days, yeah.
And not getting a whole lot of rest.
Yeah.
Not because you snored or I snored. Maybe I did. I don't know.
I definitely snore. I call the hogs, man.
But because we were just staying up late talking scripture, theology, experience, what it's like to pastor a church, a synagogue. And so like that experience of just spending so much time talking with you.
Yeah.
That to me was the most memorable, like precious part of that.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Like we had a blast.
Yeah.
And you're right. I feel like it fast tracked our friendship, because we were together for 10 days. And we were staying up all night talking about, ministry, life, marriage, theology. You name it. Just, oh man, it was so. It was wonderful, man. It was wonderful. And then to walk out of a trip like that was so incredible, and just life-changing in general, being in a Holy Land, and then to come back with a lifelong friend it's just a gift. And
also, by the way, a lifelong friend who, we're still living, and working so close together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's one thing to have a lifelong friend who lives across the country or across the world from you, which is wonderful, but we can see each other.
Absolutely.
We can have lunch.
Yeah, which is good.
You
have great taste in places to eat.
I like food.
It's good. It's good. Me too. That's why I'm small, just like you, because I like food. But man, so we talked a bit about our different traditions. We talked about, our personal relationship, our experience traveling together. One of the things I want to talk about, because as you said, and when you opened up, I didn't gloss over it. It's not lost on me. You talked about it being a heavy time.
Yeah.
And we all know it's a heavy time. It's suffering. There's war. There's war in the Holy Land right now. There are things that have happened here locally against in attacks against the Jewish community. There's a lot of, it's just an unsettled time just in the world, it feels. It just, I don't know, it just almost feels like a disequilibrium just everywhere. And, that's just on that's on a global scale. That's talking geopolitics and that kind of stuff. But
you can also add national politics to that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. National politics, of course, like very, very, very turbulent time. And so I guess my question is, and we've talked about this before, but I would love to talk about, light topic, theodicy, the question of suffering. And, every tradition has to reckon with suffering, even atheism or agnosticism, like where the human experience has to reckon with the reality of suffering. Yeah. So I'm curious, as a rabbi, as one who embraces the Jewish faith, like how does Judaism wrestle with suffering and enter into and lean into that question of suffering? And from your perspective, how is that similar or different from from the Christian perspective on suffering?
Well, I'm going to leave that second part to you.
Oh, yeah. But I would love your perspective on it.
But let's start with the Jewish part. So, I'll say the first major crisis in Judaism and in Jewish faith, kind of historically, was the destruction of the first temple, 586 BCE. The Babylonians come and destroy the temple, and this is Solomon's temple. That's the temple we're talking about here. This is 2,500 odd years ago, 2,600 years ago, and the Jews were dragged off to Babylonia, the quote unquote Babylonian captivity, and they're there in exile for 70 years until they finally come back to rebuild the temple, build the second temple. And then, by the way, the second temple too is destroyed in 70 CE by the Romans. And both of these, the Jewish tradition has to really think about, why did this happen? Because it wasn't just, we're going to destroy the temple, everybody get out of the way. All right, everybody out of the way, now we're going to destroy. I mean, these were times of great destruction, slaughter, famine, relevant now too, blood flowing in the streets. I mean, if you ever read Lamentations, or you read the very end of Second Kings, last couple chapters, that's what this is describing. And that's suffering. And the way the Jewish tradition dealt with this originally, I would say, is to say, well, if this is happening, it must be God's will. The only reason God would do this is because we've done something wrong. Kind of the covenantal theology that we see in Deuteronomy is all about, if you follow God's laws, follow the Torah, all of it will be good with you. And if not, I mean, those curses, you tell me what chapter, you know this better than I do probably.
Curse in Deuteronomy?
In Deuteronomy,
That's like 25 or something.
Something around there, 26 maybe, 26. Something like that, as well as the ones towards the end of Leviticus. They're really awful. And that is what I think the Jews of those times felt like they were experiencing. And the only way they could understand that this was happening was because they were sinful. They had sinned. So that's kind of one mode of theodicy. Anything bad that happens, to us, whoever the us is, it's our fault because this is God's plan and God is doing this to punish us for our sins. That worked in a certain way for a long time. For some people better than for other people. People have questioned that, I'm sure, too. By the time we get to the Holocaust, I mean, 2,000 odd years later from the destruction of the Second Temple, it became really hard for most Jews, I would say, to believe that. There were still some, mostly ultra-Orthodox, mostly super pious folks who said the reason that 6 million Jews died, like 1.5 million children, was because of our sins. But for most, I would say the vast majority of Jews of every stream, of every stripe, that theology just couldn't hold up anymore. Because no amount of, there was no sinfulness to require that kind of slaughter. So Jews have had to wrestle and come up with a new way of thinking about why bad things happen. Bad things happen, and why bad things happen to good people. And tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's only Jews who have had to think about this too, because those are kind of like the big historical things that have happened. But we also all know too that the kind of the system of reward and punishment that the Hebrew Bible envisions and posits sometimes works. Sometimes we catch the bad guys and reward the righteous, but so often bad guys get away with it. The righteous get cancer. And there's no, where the righteous are destroyed, killed by this or that, a falling tree, a hurricane, a tornado. And there's no making sense of it based on rewarding the righteous and punishing the wicked. The way I understand that myself more is that's a dream, a hope, an aspiration for how our world really should be, where every person gets actually what they deserve. That's what we want. That's what we pray for. And then really our actions would get us what we deserve, not only in any world to come, but in this world. So, if that theology of reward and punishment isn't working, then we have to come up with something new. And there have been lots of different Jewish approaches to how to do that and to, what's going on. From the, well, if, this happened, then that means that there's no God. Straight atheism, because God would not let this happen. This happened, therefore there is no God. And that's not a crazy leap to me. And there are lots of people who really have lost their faith over not just the Holocaust, but all kinds of awful things that they and people around them have experienced. They have prayed, and their prayers have been profoundly not answered. And then there's everything in between. Everything in between. God is causing this to happen on purpose and punishing us, and there is no God. And some of those options, which have really flourished, I would say, since the Holocaust, but also predate the Holocaust, because suffering predates all of us. Are that God chooses not to act so much in the world, and God is letting us have free will and figuring out what to do with ourselves and the world. And God might be able to act and stop things, but that's not how God has set up the world and set up God's role in the world. And then that makes me wonder, well, if God is good, how could God not stir God's self to do something during this? If I see something terrible happening, it might take me a minute to get off my butt and do something about it. But if I can do something about it, then I think I want to think that I would want to, and that I would. And if God could do something about this, whatever this is, I would hope that God would. So then the other option is, well, all right, so if God doesn't, either God can but doesn't want to, or God can't but wants to. And, a lot of the ways that we think about God sometimes are, unlimited, all-powerful, all-knowing, and et cetera. But that doesn't have to be the way we understand God. Sometimes another way of thinking about God is as being along with us, as trying to guide us to make the best choices. And this is kind of, along the lines of process theology, if you know anything about that.
I actually don't know much about it.
I'm not an expert either.
Okay.
But
I've heard a little bit, but I'm not super conversant.
The basic idea, as I understand it, and, you can all tell me, oh, you're totally getting this wrong, is, that, God is kind of always, God is like our coach. Always encouraging us, dangling in front of us like the best possible choice in every moment. What's the best thing I can say in this conversation? What's the thing I could do for my wife? What's the thing I could give? What's the best possible version of the sermon I could give this Saturday? The best possible version of me at every moment, and it's up to us to actually follow that. One way of thinking about it is we all sort of have a conscience, and we don't always listen to it. And we're not even always aware of what the most optimal, best thing for us to do ethically, morally, spiritually is. But God is the one kind of guiding us, urging us in that direction. And we don't always listen. We can't always listen, but if we did, we'd be following God's path. And so that's another way of kind of thinking about, and God can't actually make us do the right thing. So that's another way, and that means that people are going to be doing terrible things all the time. And that's another way of understanding theodicy a little bit. And then there's also there's the why do people do terrible things to each other, and then why do terrible things happen in the world? Why are there famines, not human-caused famines, but why are there, famines and tidal waves and tsunamis and hurricanes and tornadoes and heart attacks and cancer and terrible accidents that nobody is responsible for or guilty of or anything? And, in some way, there's the natural world. And God has created that in some sense. And yet what it means for God to create it is to not change it at every moment. What it means to have a law of nature is that it's a law of nature and not a law of nature today and, but not
You change the law tomorrow.
change the law tomorrow and then back, and that's hard. That's hard for us.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So these are a bunch of different options, and and I'll just say there are Jews who believe every single one of them. There are probably 50 more in between, and not many human beings and many Jews too don't think about this a whole lot, or think about believe this on Tuesday, that on Wednesday, this on Saturday, and then when that happens, totally change and flip.
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's interesting as you were laying out, the different perspectives on suffering, in Jewish thinking and Jewish theology. I've, it's so funny. I've had several of these conversations, and these people were not Jews at all. Many of them were Black dudes in a barbershop, but they probably wouldn't have called themselves process theologians or But I've heard different different approaches to this from a variety of people, from a variety of worldviews, because again, as we said earlier, suffering is universal, and what you said particularly about people who have looking at the Holocaust, looking at the suffering of the destruction of the temple, that became this question of this can't just be because of our sins, and from looking at suffering, I can't tell you how many people I've sat with as a pastor who are is God punishing me? Is this am I the church mother who loves Jesus, who comes to church every Sunday, pays her tithes, and does all the things,
and not only loves Jesus, but loves her children and the people around her.
Absolutely,
because there are people, by the way, who love Jesus and don't love people.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I would challenge if they love Jesus, but that's another conversation. That's another podcast for another Friday. But and she loves the Lord, and then she's like, the cancer diagnosis comes, and it's like, is the Lord punishing me for what? And we began to have these conversations, and I've walked with so many Christians who have walked away from the faith, particularly during COVID. There was a lot of time. I think what COVID did was give people time to slow down and pause and ask some questions that they may have been too busy to ask before. And man, a lot of people just started taking a real hard look at this question of suffering and just if God is good, or maybe he's good and he doesn't care, or they deism, that he's good and he made everything, but he doesn't intervene. He just kind of lets it cook a little bit. Yeah. And a lot of people, not just Jews, but Christians and other faiths as well, have walked away. I'm interested, you talked about the temple destructions in 586 BC and in 70 AD. I'm curious, how does the book of Job play into
that's another option which I didn't mention. Yeah.
I mean, because that's what when I think about the Christian perspective on suffering, most Christian traditions have a concept of original sin. Is what we would say that we read. I'm interested. We've talked about this before, because I think I was preaching from Genesis. I think we talked about. I think we had a discussion around the Jewish reading of what happens in Genesis 3 versus or one of the Jewish readings. I know there are many, and what happens. I even bought because of our friendship. I bought the Great Scriptures. And so I literally use it every time I preach them to her, every single time. It's fascinating. Also, fun fact, guys. rabbis, like reading the Talmud and Jewish literature, rabbis are funny. Like when you like read some of the stuff in the Talmud, I remember one time I read one, I called you on the phone. I won't bring it up right now, but it was some funny entries. I'm like, these guys are having a good time. But the Christian in the I would say particularly the Western Christian reading of that, we read that as original sin. Eastern Orthodox Christians actually don't read original sin in the same way. It's more Western Augustinian tradition, but that's
how do they read it?
They would say that it's actually not that dissimilar from, I think, many Jewish readings. That they would say not that sin is passed down, but that we all kind of have that fork in the road kind of choice, but they wouldn't read original sin in the same way because they read and interpret Romans 5 differently than Augustine did. My argument is this, I'm a Christian, so I believe Jesus is the only perfect human to walk the earth. I'm like, all right, well, if everybody blows it, why is my question. If there's only one guy who got it all right, then something has to be happening with the human race that causes us. There has to be something that's embedded in who we are that causes us to err every time. Like we always bite the fruit. However we want to read the text.
So can I just actually
go
from this for a second?
Yeah, that's weird.
So, I'm 40-something years old. You're 40-something years old.
Man, I thought you was 22, man. I was gonna card you for that glass of water, man.
I won't speak for you, but I've made a lot of mistakes. And I've had enough time now to make lots of mistakes. What about a kid? What about a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, an infant? An 8-year-old? Like at what point? If we say this original sin thing is a thing, at what does that mean that every 2-year-old is in some way sinful? Because, by the way, I've had 2-year-old. I
have a 2-year-old right now who's tearing my house up.
And
he's beautiful. He's wonderful. He be sinning, though.
But at the same time, we don't throw him in jail and we don't say, you're sinful, you're going to be punished for you. No, they're innocent in some way. And so, is there a moment, is there an age when, the original sin suddenly, kicks into... I don't know,
when it's punishable,
when it's punishable or something like how does that work? In
that's
your
a great
theological
question.
system.
I would say it's not that. So in your tradition, you guys have the bar mitzvah, right?
Yeah,
when you become a son of the Torah.
Age 13, you become responsible for fulfilling the commandments, and also responsible if you don't, if you mess something up. Yeah.
As Christians, we would say, about that age-ish. Yeah. It's on you now. Right. So as Christians, what we say, 1 Corinthians 7, that a child is born in a Christian home, they're a child of the covenant. Yeah. So they're under. It's not that dissimilar from they're children of the covenant. So I didn't evangelize my kids and say I didn't raise my kids like you're not a Christian. It's no, we are Christians. This is what we do. This is, but also let them know you have to own your faith for yourself. You have to go to Christ in repentance for yourself and so forth and so on. And, it isn't as, in Jewish tradition, it's age 13, when you become responsible for the commandments. It isn't, there is in certain Christian traditions, the practice of confirmation that is a bit more like a profession of faith and is similar to that. But what I would say, I would actually say, me and St. Augustine, that yes, children are sinful, not in the sense of they're sinful in the sense of let's put them in jail. But there's the innocence that's there as children and the proclivity, because sin, and this is also a very Augustinian way of thinking, sin isn't just stuff you do wrong in scripture and in my reading of it and in an Augustinian reading of it. It's also a inclination. It's a proclivity. It's almost, Martin Luther talked about it being curved inward toward self and away from God and away from our fellow man. So it isn't just I do this thing. Augustine also, another way that he viewed sin was as a sickness. He talked about it almost like we all kind of have this, it's a sickness. And this, and if you read his Confessions, which is often it's to this day in a lot of schools, part of the just Western philosophy reading tradition, it's like a Western classic.
I read a little bit once upon a time in college and I don't remember much.
Do you remember the part about the pear?
No, I don't remember.
Well, it's this part where he spends so much time talking about this pear that he stole. And he's loathing himself because I stole and I looked at and I knew I wasn't supposed to have it. And I just where did these desires come from? And so I think if we view sin as just stuff I do wrong, I think that's a minimalistic view. Sin is also, why is our disposition not just away from God, but away from our fellow man?
Yeah.
And what causes us that way? So, but back to Job real quick. I want to go back to Job.
Yeah. I want to get to
No.
But I want to also pick up about this disposition thing. But let's go back to Job.
Absolutely. But back to Job, because of, my view of original sin and the fact that human beings are, in a sense, fallen, in a sense, not that we're no longer in the imago Dei, like the image of God abides, and we are still, we still bear the divine image regardless of sin, what we've done, how we've behaved, whatever. We bear the divine image, the stamp of God's creation. And at the same time, there's a level in which you talked about how we don't live up to like the world, like the Torah gives us the world as we wish it were, where everybody, we fall short of this. And, the Apostle Paul in Romans calls it the glory of God. He says we fall short of the glory of God. And because of that, and because of the sin and its effect, if in the book of Romans, it talks about the way this affects the world. And we kind of read Romans 3 when God curses the ground as not cursing creation because he says creation is good, but that because humans are a little off, that now their relationship to creation is a little off. So now, Cain, the earth will Adam, the earth will bear thorns and thistles for you, and so forth, so on. So back to Job, what all this has to do with Job. What was fascinating to me reading Job is that I feel like there's an air of absurdity to sin and suffering. It feels like it's like this absurd thing, this almost a game.
I mean, that's the way Job is set up.
Yeah.
It is kind of a game,
a
contest, and Job's suffering is in some measure purposeless.
And it ends.
And let's just not forget, by the way, there's Job's suffering, and there's also the suffering of all the people around him, not the friends, but like all the people around him,
his wife,
who
and
are
his kids,
the casualties of this story.
And, this whole time, we as the reader, and would you agree, I've always been taught, if I'm remembering correctly, that Job is like the oldest book that we have in the Bible, technically, in terms of dating.
You're the one with the PhD.
Well, but, but you rabbis go hard. I don't want to.
I'm not an expert on Job, but I will say is the Hebrew in Job is some of the hardest to decipher. So, if you know a little Hebrew, Job is still impossible because there's so many words in Job that appear in Job and nowhere else in the Hebrew Bible. So it's just a tough book linguistically, and sometimes one of the reasons that could be is because it could be among the oldest, and some of the Hebrew is the most archaic.
Okay. So yes,
so I'll take your word for it.
I don't know anything about Job, and then you break down the Hebrew is among the most difficult. I love your self-deprecation.
And I don't remember reading about the dating of. So.
Well, anywho, it's a pretty old book. We can agree on that. But it's also there's this okay. You get this
so it's the New Testament,
huh?
New Testament's pretty old.
It's pretty old. It's old. It's up there, a couple thousand years. But you get. You get this contest between God and the Satan, and Job has explained nothing. No one tells Job anything. Then his wife. It's funny. I've heard jokes about Satan kills all his kids, but just leaves his wife, and why does he do that? And gives him sickness, and he lives his wife there. She says, just curse God and die. And so he doesn't have a great marriage. And all these things happen. Then he get friends who it seems that the best thing they did was those first 7 days when they show up and say nothing. That was their best act. Then you read all these conversations.
You actually read them?
I do. I read them. I've read them.
They're very long. I read them once. They're very long.
Yeah. I've read through them. I got a read through the Bible in a year plan.
Right.
I'm gonna tell you what's terrifying about all those things they say. I've said them to people. They make a lot of sense. That's and I think that's supposed to happen. You read it that's perfectly logical. And then God shows up and he's pray for him, Job, or I'm gonna kill him because these guys are terrible. And but my point is with the whole Job story is that Job never gets answers. He's left with the sovereignty of God that's not fully explained. And God when God does show up, he appears to Job out of the whirlwind. and doesn't answer any of Job's questions. He just asks Job more questions. He asks him, where were you when I created the Leviathan, and when I did this, and when I was laying the foundations, and when I was yada, 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 yada. Where were you? Didn't think you knew. So...
Right. And the bottom line.
And he's left with that.
And the way I understand that is, they're rhetorical questions. Mm-hmm. And the answer that Job gets is, you can't understand. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's another response, by the way, to theodicy, obviously. Mm-hmm. That there is some kind of plan, there is some reason that is beyond human understanding. Mm-hmm. And that can... I think sometimes work for a lot of people on an individual basis. Mm-hmm. But when we think about things that involve mass suffering, and especially on people killing people, you want me to say, slavery in America, that was God's plan. Mm-hmm. But you can't understand why. If I said that to you with a straight face, really meaning it, I hope you'd throw me out of this studio.
Hey, it would be wild. It would be wild.
Right. I mean, but that's what that theology is asking me, is making one say.
Yeah.
Right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. And at the same time, you're not wrong. And so, but what do we do? Do we just leave it at, slavery happened, the Holocaust happened. What can do we say that it's not a part of God's plan? What do we say?
Yeah. So,
or that, because my question is this: if God doesn't have a plan, and of course this doesn't make slavery great or the Holocaust wonderful, but if the suffering is meaningless, if there's no meaning, and have you read Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning?
Again, Once Upon a Time.
Yeah.
How much do I remember?
What did Viktor Frankl? I hope I don't butcher this quote. That man can endure any what if he has a why.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Something in there.
I've heard that before too.
Yeah. And so I guess my question is, as those, because you're going to, it'll be Shabbat here in a few hours. And I'm going to preach on Sunday. You're going to preach tomorrow. And, what hope do we have to offer Jewish people who have suffered, who are suffering? Yeah. For me, I pastor a diverse church, a lot of Black folks, but white folks who are suffering too, and Latino. Right. What hope do we have to offer people if our answer is that your suffering is merely, that is random? There is no plan. It just is.
The best I can do is to sit with people and to say, there's not a reason why you're suffering, why this is happening to you, and why this has happened to people, who you care about. But I love you, and I care about you, and this community cares about you, and I'm here with you. And that's sort of what Job's friends did those first 7 days.
Yeah. Then they blew it.
Just being present, with people. I mean, that's what we as clergy are in some measure trained to do. And sometimes even to sit in silence. Just being with somebody. And also, I really don't believe in silver linings. It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine when people talk about, this terrible thing happened, but there was a silver lining, and my so-and-so died, but at least no. Because you'll hear people say, this terrible thing happened, but through that, this thing happened, which is, I wouldn't have met this person, and this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't suffered in this way, and this thing, this bad thing, And it's not a silver lining. It's not like, this, the way I understand it, it's not, this really needed to happen so that this could happen, and I'm really glad it did. But there are things that we learn from our suffering. Spending time with some people I'm close to who have had different kinds of long-term progressive illnesses, whether Parkinson's or MS and things like that, they learn things about the world and their bodies and relationships. There's profound learning that happens from that suffering and from those afflictions. And I don't wish for a minute. I'm not celebrating and glad for a minute that they have them so they can learn these lessons.
Yeah.
But there is profound learning that can come from it.
Yes.
When we can grow from it. And it's not make the best of it, but not have it be for naught.
Yeah.
Even as we wish it never had happened.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's like the best I can do. It's not to do the best to make it meaningful and useful, as terrible as it is, while wishing it never happened.
Yeah.
As my therapist says, sometimes, another, uses a different word, another cursed growth opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's an opportunity to grow. This is wonderful. Yeah. No, I hear you. Is interesting. I mean, I don't, what you said about not sadistic to oh yeah, you got cancer. Now you're about to learn so much about yourself. But that's a wild sentence. And yeah, absolutely. If you were I've heard people say that, by the way, well, aren't you so glad that slavery happened so black people could be Christians? First of all, black people's Christians before slavery. Let's stop this. But also they're, they could have just sent tracts and Bibles. It would have been, that would have been fine. The missionaries could have just came that. They didn't, we didn't need the chattel slavery things. And I think what you said about Job's friends, and I do think that's one of the big lessons that we take. I tell people all the time, man, when you talk about the meaning, it isn't like a pat answer and a silver lining. And at the same time, I think if we're left with just despair, if we're left with meaninglessness and it's just completely randomized, I don't know how you get a person out the pit of despair. I don't because they're, if that's the best answer that we have. And for some people, I mean, there are some, atheists who are just hey, that really is genuinely the answer. But similarly, I've sat, we both do the work of ministry, and I've sat with people who have looked at me in the face in the middle of tremendous challenges and suffering and sickness and tragedy and said, Pastor, why did this happen? And my answer is every time, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right.
And I don't know why this has happened. I don't have a neat answer. In the New Testament, there's this passage, Romans 8:28, all things work together for good for those who love God and those who are called according to his purpose. I never quote that verse then, ever. I literally just did a training with our pastors.
You can quote that pretty swiftly now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a great verse. But there's time and place, and, I never quote that verse in that moment. Yeah. Even though, do I believe that somehow, even though you may not see this plan until the world to come, that God is somehow, this is a part of some plan? Yes. But in that moment, our responsibility is to be his ministry of presence, his silence, and it's just showing up and being a community of love, for sure.
And I'll say, two more things about this. One, at least within my congregation and within the Jewish people generally, there's a lot of variation in theology, and it runs the gamut. And so sitting with somebody in front of me, and if I have a sense of what their theology is, part of my job is to reflect that back to them, and to speak in their theological language and idiom and system, and not to tell them they're wrong. That's part of sitting with them. But it's also not to impose my own theology on them. The other piece, though, I want to talk about in terms of this that we haven't touched on is, the world to come. Because that's another way that people have really understood suffering. We suffer in this world to be rewarded in a future world, in a future life, in the world to come, in heaven, whatever you want to call it. And or our suffering here is, how much we suffer here is indicative of how much we will be rewarded, or many versions of that. And sometimes I think, that suffering here drives belief in a world to come, because if things are this bad, there has to be something else. So that's another direction people go theologically. And, and you could say God is not taking such good care of us in this world now because of what's waiting for us. And there are people for whom that very much works, and that offers a lot of solace to them. There are people who would be, would say, how do you know? How do I know? Like, where's the proof? Show me the money, which none of us can do. And that's so much a matter of not experience, but of faith.
Yeah.
But when people give me that response, if they believe that, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, for sure, man. It's I agree. Like, I'll be honest with you. Like, as a Christ believer and believer in the resurrection, like that is for the Christian. That's the great hope, right? Is the not just going to heaven. I think that's been a I think the way that's been taught often in Christian circles has not always been the best. It's like, pie in the sky escapism, like, hey, well, don't worry about, suffering here because you're going to get it all in heaven and it'll be fine. I think I don't think that's a biblical or Christ honoring or even helpful way to approach the world.
Can I just ask you?
Yeah.
I feel like I can say pretty confidently that is not a perspective that is really clear in the Hebrew Bible in any way.
Yeah.
Is it clearer in the New Testament?
Yeah, I think it's clear in the New Testament. I mean, but the New Testament, we're drawing on the Hebrew scriptures too. Like, Job, I know that my Redeemer lives and in my flesh I shall see him. Like we pull that straight out of Job's declaration that, like I will, after death, I will stand in my body, I will see him. And so, but yeah, it's much more stated. I mean, because of the resurrection of Jesus, like we're like, hey, like Jesus' whole shtick, so to speak, is that, he comes, he lives, he dies. Now, if he had just stayed dead, then it's just like he was a great guy who died, like, and that would have been that. But because we believe in the resurrection, it's like, okay, now his claims and this demonstrated defeat of death now gives us hope that, hey, the New Testament in Colossians 1 calls him the first fruits from the dead. And so the Christian hope in the resurrection is not just like, hey, I get to go to heaven because this world sucked, but it's this idea that God made promises throughout the scriptures, throughout the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament, that he's going to actually make this world right. It is about the resurrection. It is about a world, it is about the resurrection, but it's also about a setting right of the world as it should be. Because, I mean, what you said earlier about the world not being as it should be, Christian theology, most folks would look at the world and say, this ain't how it's supposed to be, but yeah, our whole hope is that Jesus is going to restore the world and it's kind of like, the Garden of Eden plus, is what we're looking forward to.
Right. And, I would say, like there's a wide range of Jewish thinking too. The end of days, eschatology, what happens when we die, heaven, hell, all, the world to come, all of these things. There's much less kind of like organized, systematic theology about it because there's so little evidence in the Hebrew Bible and also in people's human experience. And lots of hope and speculation and curiosity. But maybe like the most simple, way of thinking about this for Jews is that the hope for the future is when God is going to perfect the world, is not necessarily about resurrection or anything like that, but for the people who are then there. In the same way that we hope that the world that our children will live in will be a lot better, or at least a little better than the world that we live in. That we at some point get to a world that is fully redeemed and holy and whole. And we may not live to see it. We probably won't. But someday that's what we aspire to for our grandbabies.
No, I hear you though. That's good. That's good stuff. I think in Christian thinking around heaven, I think some people have overstated what the New Testament actually says about the world to come. It actually says there's more there about what's not going to be there. I forgot. There's a technical term for this. You may know it.
What, sinners?
Sinners. Yeah. Well, there'll be no sinners. It does say that. But it, what is it? Where it's basically doing theology by saying was not. Is it
negative theology?
Negative
well,
theology.
That's like one way of talking about, like, we can't actually describe God by what God is.
Yes.
We can only talk about God in the negative. God is not limited. God is,
Yes. And that's actually a lot of the way the New Testament and the scriptures talk about heaven and the world to come is like there will be no suffering, no tears, no death. There will be no sun is actually what the New Testament says. For God and the Lamb will be its light. There, and so it often paints this picture of what will be by removing. Basically, there it does say there will be no sinners. One of my favorite, I tell people all the time, like is a line in Revelations, like Revelation 22. It says, outside are the cowards. So I tell people, don't be a coward. It says you won't make it into the gates. But anyway.
One thing I just want to appreciate about you for a second.
Yeah.
I don't know how common it is for pastors to be able to, reflect clearly on Eastern Orthodox tradition, and Augustine, and obviously quote the New Testament, fluently, but to really have a grasp not just on one narrow slice of Christian thinking, but kind of the whole swoop of it, globally and also throughout time, in history. So there are people who can do that, but they're not so typical, I think. So I just want to really appreciate, and to all your listeners, I don't know if every pastor can kind of do what you do. So I hope you all appreciate what you got here.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that a lot, man. I like to read. I found a lot of solace in the. I do believe very strongly, even though I got my lane and my theological persuasion for sure. I believe very strongly that I don't know if I think there are some things that are established clearly in the scripture and creeds that makes a Christian that you got to believe. But I think outside of those, clear things defined in like the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, and the creeds of the church, I think that each Christian tradition has something unique to offer and gives us a perspective that, so I try to be conversant. So I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it a lot. So continuing with this conversation around the Odyssey, and you talked about earlier, it's a heavy time, lots of suffering, just around the world. Man, I want to turn our attention towards Gaza and what's happening there. So today, it's one of those things where it seems like day by day it's development. It just every day. And so today is Friday. It's August 8th. By the time this airs, we can't know what's going to be going on. I just saw a news report today that President Netanyahu said that now Israel is going to move to occupy the entire Gaza Strip. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert and know what all that means. From my perspective, I'm like, that doesn't sound good, but I'm not going to pretend to know exactly all the things. But I'm like, okay, that's an escalation. And I'm also seeing what was fascinating to me is that it seems like some of the military in Israel are saying like, this isn't the thing to be doing. And I want to talk about that. And I shared this when you invited me to speak at the synagogue a few months ago, that I remember October the 7th because that's my birthday. Yep. And I remember having a good time on my birthday, doing birthday stuff, having a great time. And I look in the news, 1,200 people slaughtered in Israel by Hamas. And I forgot how many were taken hostage. Another couple hundred.
Yeah, about
300.
200, 250.
Yeah, 250 taken. And I remember seeing that and seeing everything that transpired thereafter. And I just couldn't get my head around it, and just and then even seeing some of the footage and some of the brutality and some of the assault. And so, I knew I knew for sure, okay, there is going to be a strong response, as there should be for something like that. You know, as I'm of the age, I just graduated from high school when September 11th, 2001. I had just graduated. I was 17 years old when that happened. I remember when that happened, I said, there's going to be a swift response, as there should be. And there was. And, you know, as the response continued, obviously, people who would slaughter 1,200 people and kidnap 250 or 250 people and all the things that happened. Incredible tragedy. This is not a situation where it's just like, oh, okay, that, you know, this isn't great actors. These are not great people doing this. And so Israel has a response and it's continued. But where we sit today, you know, it's kind of like, okay, I think the world has begun to say, okay, now there seems to be starvation, like actual starvation and the destruction of infrastructure. And, you know, I'm seeing at this point on social media, on regular media, you know, the starvation, the death of, you know, the estimates, I believe last number I saw was around 18,000 children. And I could be imprecise with that number, but I think it was somewhere in there.
And we can talk about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, all these questions. And so, you know, obviously we know what's going on in the Middle East is profoundly, it's complex. And I mean, it's just complex. And I know that there are people who are wrestling with this, but I want us to talk about what's happening in Gaza, your perspective on it. Is it safe to call it, is it genocide? And some would say yes, some would say no. And how do we interact with this in a space where there's so much misinformation, disinformation, spin? Like, how do we lean into this whole conversation? Because it's jarring. It's just jarring to see. It's jarring.
Jarring and sad and upsetting and horrifying and awful. Awful in every way. So there are a lot of, one way to start thinking about this is just by thinking about what do we know, what can we know, and how do we know it? A lot of the numbers, fatalities, you know, details being reported out of Gaza are coming from the Gaza Health Ministry, which is, you assume, controlled by Hamas, which is the controlling power in Gaza that's not the Israeli army. They are not reliable. How the exact way they are unreliable in any particular moment is also totally unknowable. So it's not like, oh, we reliably know they are inflating this we have no idea. But I also don't trust them. In the same way that I don't trust Hamas in any way, I don't trust them to accurately report casualties. Which doesn't mean that there are not casualties. It just means that we don't actually know really what they are. We don't actually really know, you know, from folks on the ground, what the state of things is in Gaza. Also, in terms of reporting in Gaza, there are very few people reporting, like actually independent reporters reporting in Gaza. And most of the ones who are probably have some relationship connection that Hamas allows them to operate. Like the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN and Reuters, like they don't have their own independent people who are like on assignment in Gaza. They might have some Gazans who are reporting, but if you're a Gazan reporting independently for pick your news outlet, and you report in ways that Hamas does not like, you will not be reporting long. So there's a real problem with what information we have. And other, you know, and the reason people are not sending reporters there otherwise is because it's totally unsafe. So, and the Israeli army also isn't letting, and the Israeli government isn't letting reporters in except, you know, in very supervised ways, maybe for their own reasons and also because they know they can't keep them safe. But usually if somebody wants to go report on what's going on in St. Louis, they'll go out and talk to people wherever they want, whoever they want. That's not happening in Gaza. So it's really hard to know at any given moment what really reliably is actually happening. And that means people make up their own stories. To say that things are much worse than they are, to say that things are much better than they are. And it's really hard to know. So I enter all of this with some humility about what I do know and can know, what I'm really certain about. And I when I think about things that I wish we could all be a little more skeptical about a lot of the news that we're seeing from there right now. I don't mean that generally about everything you read in every newspaper about everything. I actually do believe, in journalism and that our reporters are doing the best they can. There, I don't know that we're getting really good, accurate, independent information. And it's really clear that thousands and thousands of people have been killed. Innocent people, civilians, adults, children. It's clear there's been devastation and destruction of infrastructure, homes, business, like everything. I mean, literally.
Yeah.
Just think,
I mean,
right.
I'm like, it's like, I'm be honest, like I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm like, bro, I hear what you're saying about reporting, but I've seen like I've seen pictures from where Canada did their airdrop, and it's like,
there's nothing
it's
there.
just nothing there.
There's nothing there.
It's just rubble.
Right. There's nothing there. And it's clear that there are a lot of really hungry people. And is it a lot of really hungry people? Is it mass starvation? I don't actually know. Maybe there are people who think they know. Regardless, it's not okay. So I'm a little, I want us to be a little humble about what we know about, what we feel like we can know about some of the details, the granular stuff. And big picture, things are really clear. In terms of whether this is genocide, I tend not to use that. I don't use that word in describing this myself, because and this is my own, where I'm coming from. When I think about the way I use that word, and when I think about Bosnia, I think about Rwanda, I obviously think about the Holocaust. I think about Cambodia, about people being lined up and shot, or killed in many, many other ways as well, because of their identity. And there are lots of other legal definitions of what might be some of the things that constitute genocide. I'm not an expert on that, but this feels different from some the things that have been called genocides, as far as I know, in the past. That doesn't make it okay. Something doesn't have to be a genocide for it to be abhorrent. And Hamas, their attack on October 7th was, it's certainly not genocide. There was a genocidal aspect to it, because their goal was to kill as many Jews, Israelis, as they could. And if they had had more people and guns and time and resistance, they would have killed more. That was clearly their goal. Israel's goal, as far as I believe, and by the way, we're talking about, the goal of a country is a ridiculous thing, because a country is made up of all the people, and all the leadership and everything. And I certainly don't want to be painted as, what I believe as being exactly what, any given American president or administration, believes. But my sense is that Israel is not trying intentionally, let's kill as many people as we can. That's not their goal. They are trying to kill as many members of Hamas as they can, without often paying as much attention to anybody who's going to get killed in the crossfire. And they've been much less careful, I think, than they should have been, than they could have been, than they had been in the past. And still, the goal does not seem to be to kill as many Gazans as possible. They could have done that much more efficiently, and also not even to kill, let's make it so that they eventually die. That's not what Israel's about. Israel wants to be safe from Hamas, and that was goal number one on October 7th. Since then, and that's what they were, doing for months. And you can like how they did it. You can think they went way too far. At a certain point, it became too much and unnecessary. I can't tell you exactly what that moment was, but like millions of Israelis, I think this war needs to stop. People need food. People need medical care. Life needs to be rebuilt and restarted. And I don't have an answer though about great, we have some kind of peace. Hostages need to come home. But what does that mean for people in Gaza? And for Israel too, by the way, because we just start rebuilding it, in Gaza and Israel completely pulls out. Who's in charge? Hamas, which is not a great option for Israel, even as they have much less military capacity than they did before. Well, they didn't, and then they built it up, and great. In 5 years, we're going to have another October 7th. Nobody has stomach for that. And for the people of Gaza who've been living under the inhumane, suicidal reign of Hamas, Hamas staying in charge is not a good option either. Hamas is not popular. They're terrible. So what needs to happen is that there needs to be some other government in Gaza. And here's where we get to the kind of the real stuckness. And it's a function of Israeli politics, as I see it at least. So Prime Minister Netanyahu is, in power now, and he is only staying in power because the most right-wing folks in his coalition, in his governing coalition, are getting what they want. And once they stop getting what they want, there could be a vote of no confidence, and he could lose power. He is highly unpopular. So if elections were held today, he'd lose. Elections are not scheduled for another year and 3 months or so, about 15 months. So unless the governing coalition splinters, nothing politically is really going to change. And there's no incentive for them to splinter because the majority is in power, and they don't want to lose power. So Netanyahu is catering to the people the furthest on the right to stay in power and also to stay out of jail because he's under indictment. But as long as he's prime minister and can control who's the attorney general is and all judges and all this stuff, nothing's going to happen to him. He can keep delaying and delaying and delaying. But once he's out of office, then he might be facing some legal consequences of corruption and stuff. So he wants to stay in office. He wants to empower the people who are keeping him in office. And they want to keep this war going because they are the people who want to see, I wouldn't say, Gazans die. They just want to see them somewhere else. And they don't really care where. And they'd like to see Israel, the greater Israel of Jews, inhabiting and controlling the entire land of Israel. So that's Gaza and, Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, the occupied territories. And right now, because politically it's to Netanyahu's advantage, they are getting what they want. And that's not what a majority of Israelis want. It's certainly not what a majority of American Jews want. And this is politics.
Isn't I appreciate your answer, Rabbi Noah. Isn't what you said about how this right-wing coalition that's keeping that is pushing this war and continue it going. Say, okay, they don't want them all die, but they want them somewhere else. And that's like ethnic cleansing, right? Is that not what that is?
Ethnic cleansing. There's certainly, by the way, I'll also say, there have been war crimes. There have been there have been soldiers who have done things that they should not have done. Commanders who have done things they should not have done. And also, just talking about America for a second, remember back in 2020 when we were protesting, George Floyd, there were some really bad police officers.
Oh, yeah.
And most police officers are good people, trying to keep us safe and trying to keep themselves safe and doing good in the world. Most soldiers in the Israeli army too are good people trying to keep themselves safe, trying to keep their country safe, trying to do the best they can do and are not out there to hurt anybody innocent and do the best they can. And there's some people who've done some really terrible things too. But But yeah, there's some people in the Israeli government who really don't care. And yeah, you could call it ethnic cleansing, which is not the same as genocide in my lexicon. But that's what they're trying to do. Sure.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean they've been completely successful. Yeah, because Gaza is still there. And by the way, when people say, why won't Jordan or Egypt or any other country let all these folks from Gaza in? Because that allows Israel to then just bulldoze this whole area and build President Trump's
Riviera by the
Mediterranean.
I've seen that video.
That's not what Gazans want. They want their homes where they've lived for generations. And also, by the way, none of those countries are super excited about having 2 million refugees to absorb either.
Yeah. No, that's I hear what you're saying, because that was one of the questions I had, which is like, okay, well, why don't these other Arab nations help and so forth, so on. But again, it's complex. And back to the ethnic cleansing versus genocide, I read this article by a Jewish scholar, actually. His name is Omer Bartov on New York Times. And he said, I'm a genocide scholar. I know it when I see it. And he argues that it is, not because Israel has rounded up 2 million Palestinians and obliterated everyone. But he argues that what Israel has done is made it impossible for these people to flourish by the not just the destruction of, I want to say this, I do not think Hamas are great guys at all, and so I when Israel, when they're saying hey, we need to deal with Hamas, I hear that. But it's also the destruction of the core infrastructure and water and so forth. Okay, you're going to injure Hamas for sure, but you're these millions of people who, as we both identified, are not flourishing under Hamas rule. You're
talk about suffering.
Yes, yeah. We're talking about real suffering. I can't, and so it's. Is this really the way?
No, the answer is no.
Yeah.
We can argue about whether we want to use the word genocide or not. And I will say also for Jews, it's a particularly fraught word, because we have one main thing in mind when we hear about genocide, and that's obviously the Holocaust, which this doesn't feel like. And something does not need to be, we don't need to call something genocide for it to be horrible and wrong. And whether we call it genocide or we don't call it genocide, it's horrible and wrong. And, look, maybe it's because of my own sense of this is not what my people experienced as genocide, that I have trouble calling this genocide. But I have no trouble saying that something needs to change, that this has not been okay. And I'm disappointed and outraged at what the Israeli government has done. And, talk about, infrastructure and all that for a second. We all agree, I think, that Hamas needs to be stopped. Israel needs to be safe. Gazans need to be free to live and flourish and should be able to live in safety and dignity and peace. And it's not actually clear how to accomplish that. This could all, by the way, end very quickly if Hamas was willing to lay down their arms. That's what 22 Arab countries called for. Last week.
I was very surprised to see that, by the way. I just woke up okay.
So that could be, that's the fastest way to end Palestinian Gazan suffering. Because what Israel wants more than anything is to not have a genocidal people, not people, but group on their border, waiting for the next opportunity to kill innocent people. So how do we accomplish that? Well, Netanyahu has his own reasons for doing things the way he wants to. But there's been no strategy for rebuilding a new government. And that's also part of Netanyahu and his governing coalition strategy. because they want to control Gaza, and they want Jews and Israelis living in Gaza. But that's not what Israel wants, what Israelis want. That's not what the thousands of people protesting in Israel every Saturday night want. That's not what the American Jewish community wants. That's not what I want. But what we want, Hamas is going to have to actually at some point give up.
Yeah.
Because until they do, Israel's not going to stop. Or if they do, there's going to have to be some they're going to have to give, the Israeli government's going to have to give in some way. And they are somewhat disincentivized to do that right now. So it's a pretty stuck, awful, really sad situation.
No, I hear you. How do we, and I appreciate this. I know this is stuff to, like you talked about, is heavy stuff that we're talking about. But, if I was watching Lecrae's podcast, The Deep End, he was like, we in the deep end, And, I remember when I was in Israel and we visited Yad Vashem.
That's the Holocaust Museum.
Holocaust Museum. And I'll never forget the experience.
Yeah.
It's like seared in my memory in the way that few things are. And I remember walking through and just seeing, I remember them having like the suitcases and the shoes of the children. Like I'll just never forget it. And I think one of the reasons that the outcry from the world has kind of grown, for some has been loud from the beginning, but
for some it was loud before October 7th.
Yeah, absolutely. But definitely in the wake of what's happening, the world has cried out because of Jewish history. It's like, wait a minute, okay, we I'm not a Holocaust denier. I've seen the proof. We've seen okay, and obviously and I'll say this, for me personally, you're my friend. Man, I have, because of our relationship and my proximity to the Jewish community, I love the Jewish community. I've had a great experience with the Jewish community. Literally, I walk around my church, it's still just random Stars of David and menorahs around because it's a 4%. So in my faith, it's rooted. Paul talks about in the book of Romans how we as Christians, how we shouldn't boast against the root. He calls Judaism the root. And so I spend literally every day of my life looking into the Hebrew scriptures, which is the basis of my faith. And so I just have this warmth. And so part of the I guess just the grief for me is this is a community that I actually love, that I have a relationship with, that I have friends in. Right. And to look on TV and to see what's happening and to see I think for some it just feels like hypocrisy because it's hey guys, okay, the Holocaust, and so
and even if the Holocaust and what's going on in Gaza are not the same, if something terrible happened to us, we should not do something terrible, even differently terrible, to other people. I'm with you 100%. Israel has not made it easy for people to support Israel, and the Jewish people.
I appreciate those responses. And, I think it adds nuance and color as this conversation has to continue. And I also appreciate you saying clearly that you're against this war, because I'm against this war. It's terrible at this point. It's hard to justify. And I want to see peace. I want to see it stop. I want to see us get to a place where Palestinians, I have Palestinian friends. I have, there's a restaurant that I eat here at Catholic all the time. The brother who owns it is Palestinian. He has children in the West Bank. And so these are real people, and I just want to see them have peace and flourish.
Absolutely.
And, get to a place and get to a place where we can say, okay, let's put it to rest.
And by the way, if we had a crystal ball, and we could look into it and say, oh, Israel occupying Gaza for the next month or 2 months or 3 months is going to actually eradicate Hamas and make Gaza a safe, inhabitable place for a new, different government to actually take hold and to bring about peace, which is unlikely, let's say, but not the most crazy thing. If we had a crystal ball and we could, see that and know that, I'd say, all right, 3 more months, 2 more months, however long, but we don't. And we all want the same thing. Most of us, you and me for sure. But how to get there is really unclear.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I knew what the best way was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. And even people of really good intention may not agree about what the best thing is now that's going to create what those of us of good faith want.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about the ones who want Israel to permanently occupy, not occupy militarily, to occupy and live in Gaza and, have the Gazans go and not be Gazans, be somewhere else. But I'm talking about people of decent faith and, who want there to be a place in Gaza for Palestinians, for there to be a Palestinian state, for people to live side by side in peace and security, with dignity. How to get there, reasonable people can disagree about. And I wish I knew what the best way was today.
Well, my brother, I'm glad that we could have this conversation. As we kind of wrap up, I'm interested around this topic and other topics. I think, to my knowledge, as we've been talking for a while now, but at the end of this podcast, you're still Jewish, I think.
You haven't converted me yet. How am I doing?
I've been trying. I'm still a Christian. We've been at it. We've been at it for how many years now? What is it, like 8 years now or something? It's been a bit. So I'm still. We're still our respective faith traditions. Man, how can we, even in the areas of agreement, disagree, seeing things, worldview differences and things like this, how can we continue to cultivate these types of friendships and relationships and be enriched by them?
Keep it up, man. Conversations like this, whether on a podcast or over some more food than just water.
Yes. I should have brought some food. I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
It's really nice water.
I don't eat on camera. Ever. But just more talking, studying together, and I really appreciate being pushed and challenged by you. And I'm grateful for it. And I also appreciate that, you listen deeply. Yeah. And I hope I can be as good a friend to you as you are to me.
Oh yeah.
Because I have so much respect and gratitude to you. And just more of this.
Absolutely. And I just want to express to you as well, you have been a tremendous friend to me. Tremendous. Y'all, me and Rabbi Noah have walked through life stuff together. He's my personal rabbi. I've gone to him. I'm serious. When, sometimes, I'm like, hey man, I'm gonna be honest. Here's some reasons. I'm gonna give you some good friends. Get you some friends that are outside your faith tradition, right? I'm just gonna be honest. I know Rabbi Noah. He ain't on my board. He ain't in my denomination. He don't go to my church.
I don't live in your house.
Yeah, he doesn't live in my house. So I can come say, hey, man, here are problems I can't tell anybody. And I need your perspective. And we're able to share and we're able to connect. Yeah. And it's also fun, too, because there's overlap. Because sometimes we're talking, it's like, Jews do that? Christians do that? Oh, sometimes the same characters in our congregations. Okay, it's just a difference, and we just got a few more books. But I've really valued our relationship, really, and my wife values our relationship. She'll tell me, have you talked to Rabbi Noah, gotten his perspective, and so I'm grateful for our relationship. I think I agree. Continuing conversations, eating together, finding ways to, I know you have to keep kosher, and so I'm with it. Some good kosher food out there, y'all, believe me. But dining together, spending time together. And I think it's okay to, be okay to okay, we see some things differently, and that's okay. We can still have fun. And
what I also really appreciate is that I can ask you things like, all right, what's the deal with this? And you can do the same.
For sure.
And having somebody who, comes from a really different perspective and background, and kind of sits somewhere really different, that you can actually be honest with and not worry about, I'm going to offend you if I ask.
It's nice. The safety is nice.
It's a really nice thing, and I really do feel safe.
Yeah,
talking with you. So I'm so grateful for that.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Noah. And y'all, this has been another episode of Dig In with Dr. Los, a very special episode. I have my friend, my brother, Rabbi Noah Arnow, and I'm just so grateful for the time, anytime we get to hang out.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope the episode challenged you. I hope it caused you to think differently about some things, to ask some questions. I want to encourage you, follow, share, drop a comment, ask a question. I'll be fielding questions continually. Give your opinion, join the conversation. We're continuing this dialogue together. There's a lot of things going on in the world. And one of the best things we can do to bring healing and to bring reconciliation to the world is to actually be willing to step outside of our own spaces, our own traditions, and to befriend and to grow closer to those who view things differently, but who are still in the image of God and can actually offer you some wisdom and challenge what you think. So I hope this episode was a blessing to you. Follow, share, and check out more episodes forthcoming on Dig In with Dr. Los. God bless you. See you later. Peace.